Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. Our cover story tonight is about the Russia-Ukraine war. For the last 1 year, the war has dominated global headlines. And over the last few weeks, particularly, the battle for Bakhmut has dominated the discourse. In the latest, the Wagner chief has claimed that Bakhmut has fallen. And this is a development which has far-reaching implications. Zelensky earlier, remember, talked about how if Bakhmut fell to Russian forces, the president, Vladimir Putin, would sell the victory to the West, to his society, to China, to Iran. And tonight on Gravitas, we tell you all about why Bakhmut is so significant in the Russia-Ukraine war. What is Ukraine saying about Wagner's claim? Will Kiev be able to recover the east of Ukraine, or is this a turning point in this war? This and more coming up in our cover story tonight. Also on the show for you, inflation in Pakistan has touched a 60-year high. We tell you all about the state of Pakistan's economy. The Bhutanese king's visit to India coming in the backdrop of the Bhutanese Prime Minister's statements on Doklam. We tell you about the expectations from this visit. Anti-drone laser weapon prototype unveiled in Japan. What triggered this move and what can these weapons do and why are they important? A raging controversy over a French minister's Playboy shoot. We get you the complete story. There are two types of battles. The first adds to war casualty, and the second changes the very course of the war, like the Battle of Stalingrad during the Second World War, which shifted the course of the war for the German army. Now, while the battle for Bakhmut is not of a scale as epic as Stalingrad, it is historic nonetheless. And its importance can be measured by the ferocity of the Russian attack and the intensity of Ukraine's defense. You see, the fighting has been going on for 7 long and bloody months. Both the sides have put in their all. Bakhmut has become a testing ground for Russia's new age weapons and Ukraine's resistance. A stalemate, contrary claims, and 7 months later, one side appears to have moved the scale in its favor. Listen in.
It is April 2nd, 11 sharp. Behind me is Bakhmut City Administration Building. This is a Russian flag. It says on the flag, in good memory of Vladimir Tatarsky. From a legal point of view, we have taken Bakhmut, and the commanders of the units that took the administration building and the whole central district will carry and put up those flags. The flag of PMC Wagner. They were the guys who took Bakhmut. From a legal point of view, it is ours.
That was the Wagner chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin. He claims to have captured Bakhmut, most of Bakhmut. And the immediate question is, what is Ukraine saying? Not much, actually. Like we often tell you on Gravitas, leaders don't really say what they mean and they don't mean what they say. And Volodymyr Zelensky here has been leaving you to fill in the blanks between the vague words that he has been using. So are we to believe that Bakhmut has fallen? One thing is clear, Ukraine will never look the same. Just look at where Bakhmut is located on the map. The control of this city enables Russia to cut Ukraine out of Donetsk. So is this the beginning of the end of Ukraine as we know it? And let me tell you why I ask this question. One, because of the domino effect that's waiting to happen. And number two, because chances are Ukraine may not be able to win back Bakhmut and the other strategic towns. We will tell you why. Let's start with the domino effect. Not too long ago, Volodymyr Zelensky had told a US media outlet that soon after Bakhmut, Russia could, quote-unquote, go to Kramatorsk. They could go to Sloviansk. It would be an open road for the Russians after Bakhmut to other towns in Ukraine in the Donetsk direction. And he is right. Now that Bakhmut has fallen, it may not be long before the Russian troops and the Wagner men march to Sloviansk, followed by Kramatorsk. Remember, already has Soledar, Mariupol, and Melitopol, and most of this region. So do you think Ukraine will be able to win back any of these cities? Of course, Ukraine has had successful counter-offensives in the past, but that is the past. A repeat in the future may seem over-ambitious. Ask yourself this question. For how long can a country continue to fight another while depending on a third and a fourth country? My point is, today Ukraine is 101% dependent on the West to fuel this war. For every war-related resource, the only resource Ukraine has is human resource. And this human resource also has now suffered a setback. You see, it was not for nothing that Zelensky would refer to Bakhmut as Ukraine's fort and the country's emblem of resistance. The fall of Bakhmut has not only come with a loss of prestige, but also a deep sense of moral loss. Also, Ukrainian troops are caught in a supply chain crisis, so much so that Ukraine is running out of artillery ammunition. We have been telling you for a while now that Ukraine is exhausting weapons at an alarming rate. More than the US or the NATO can produce these weapons. Ukraine faces the high possibility of running out of shells by the end of this year unless the West miraculously ramps up its production at warp speed. And just how likely is that? So far, the West has sent aid and equipment worth nearly $50 billion. And a lot of the recent war machines were promised, keeping in mind the volatile situation in Bakhmut. You see, Bakhmut allowed Zelensky to ask for more and more. The Leopards, howitzers, tanks, aircraft. And now, with the fall of Bakhmut, how much will the West be willing to or be able to afford to send to Ukraine? So Ukraine is losing arms, its morale, its personnel, its cities. What's left? Is it just Bakhmut or is Ukraine starting to lose the war? Have a look at this. This is a recent video of Bakhmut. Nothing is left there. Many Ukrainian towns have been reduced to rubble. Around 30% of the country's population has been displaced, and the Russians are not done. You see, the Kremlin knows its limits, knows how much is achievable. After all, this is a country Russia has been fighting since 2014, since Crimea. But Russia also knows how much more it can push its luck, how much is within reach And currently, eastern Ukraine definitely is. So we are back to the question, what's next? Some analysts we spoke to tell us that we may want to consider the possibility of Ukraine being divided into two along the Dnipro River, with eastern and southern parts to Russia, along with the Black Sea and whatever remains of Ukraine brought under the NATO protection. What else? We are told it may be only a matter of time and maybe a couple of more cities before Zelensky is forced to reach out to the Chinese President Xi Jinping to talk to Putin, negotiate, and bring an end to this war. And we know for a fact that the Chinese peace plan does not involve withdrawal of Russian troops. It also does not involve returning of cities, nor does it guarantee a Ukraine that once was. I know what some of you are thinking. Can a single battle be so decisive? You see, it is not for nothing that we are calling Bakhmut historic. Meanwhile, a certain Russian war blogger has been making headlines around the world, posthumously. His name is Vladlen Tatarsky. He was killed at a cafe in St. Petersburg over the weekend, and Russia is calling Tatarsky's killing an act of terror. Who killed the blogger? That is yet to be ascertained. What we know, though, is that the targeted blast that killed Tatarsky also injured over 20 others. Who would target a blogger? And what made this blogger so important? Our next report telling you.
Vladlen Tatarsky was a well-known name in Russia. His real name was Maxim Fomin. Tatarsky was 70 years old and he ran a military blog. Tatarsky became a blogger by chance, also Russian by chance. Tatarsky was born in Ukraine, in the Donbas region to be specific. That's where he began his career. As a coal mine worker. This was before he got into the furniture business, before running out of business, robbing a bank and going to prison. But fate had different things planned for this man. In 2014, when Russia-backed separatists seized Donbas, Tatarsky escaped prison and went on to fight on the front lines of the Crimean War in favor of Russia. When Russia invaded Ukraine last year, Tatarsky began blogging, giving a running commentary on the war, peddling pro-war propaganda. Tatarsky became famous. His Telegram account attracted some 560,000 followers. But along with fame, Tatarsky also courted controversy. Once he called on Russian troops to attack the infrastructure that would guarantee maximum Ukrainian casualty. Ukraine sanctioned Tatarsky for his extreme views. On Sunday, Tatarsky was addressing his followers at a cafe in St. Petersburg. It was then that a woman handed over a figure or mini sculpture to Tatarsky. Soon, all that remained was blood and glass. The moment of the blast was caught on camera. This is what remains of the cafe after the blast. The Kremlin is calling it an act of terrorism.
Well, this is a terrorist act. There is information indicating that the Ukrainian special services may be involved in the planning of this terrorist act.
A thought the Wagner chief does not subscribe to. Yevgeny Prigozhin says he would, quote-unquote, not blame the Kyiv regime. If not Ukraine, then who killed the Russian blogger? This is Daria Trepova. She is 26 years old and she has been detained over Tatarsky's killing. In a video released by the Russian Interior Ministry, Trepova is heard admitting being responsible for the bomb-laden figurine.
Понимаешь, за что задержана?
Понимаю.
За что? за, я бы сказала, пребывание на месте убийства Владлена Татарского.
Что ты сделала?
Я принесла туда эту статуэтку, которая взорвалась.
А кто тебе передал эту статуэтку?
Можно я попозже расскажу?
Was this under duress? There's no reason to believe it wasn't. Russian officials continue to point the finger at Ukraine. They say the Ukrainian security service collaborated with jailed Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny's anti-corruption foundation. Over the weekend, many in Russia laid flowers and lit candles at the scene of the blast. People were heard praising Tatarsky and expressing their shock at what had happened.
Our next story is from Pakistan, a country on the brink of disaster. Not just politically, but also economically. Have a look at this report. Last month, inflation in Pakistan touched a 60-year high, 6-0. The rate of year-on-year inflation hit 35.37% in March. This was the highest level that the country has seen since March 1965. If I speak of the forex reserves specifically, they have fallen yet again. Last week, they shrank by $354 million after being on the rise for 6 weeks. And let's not even talk about the food prices. Last week, Pakistan's retail inflation peaked to 47%, with the rates of essential commodities touching the skies. The price of flour surged by a staggering 120.66%. The price of onions surged by 228%. The price of tea by 94.6%. Price of eggs by 79.56%. Now remember, these figures come just days after 8 women and 3 children lost their lives in a stampede. This was during the distribution of food aid in the southern city of Karachi. That's the level of desperation that the country is witnessing. Overall, 21 people have died in such stampedes over food in recent days. Do you think that's bad? Then take a look at this report. The budget of Jammu and Kashmir is twice the size of the bailout requested by Pakistan from the International Monetary Fund. That's right. Last month, the government announced a $14.5 billion budget for the Union Territory. $14.5 billion. This money will be used for the development and infrastructure projects. Do you know how much money Pakistan has sought from the IMF? $7 billion only. So simply put, the budget of Jammu and Kashmir is way more than the money that Pakistan needs for survival. And this is embarrassing, to say the least. You see, for decades now, Pakistan has peddled lies on Kashmir, pushed its propaganda on diplomatic platforms, and look at where that has gotten the country. As India invests in Kashmir's development, Pakistan is battling for survival every day. The question is, what is it doing to get out of this mess? We know that the IMF is certainly not helping. It is imposing one condition after another, stalling the release of the next bailout. The Arab world is not helping either. Last month, remember, Saudi Arabia said it will no longer be willing to bail out Islamabad. It refused to provide any more interest-free loans. And why is that? Because of Pakistan's inability to pay its loans, its inability to get the debt down, its inability to fix its economy. And this has irked the kingdom. And so it has scrapped the avenue of a bailout. Kuwait, by the way, is doing something similar. It is pushing Pakistan to pay its dues, insisting on immediate payment of diesel purchase. It wants Islamabad to make the payment right at the time of purchase of diesel. It also wants Pakistan to clear its previous dues as soon as possible. What about China? well, it is passing the buck as well. It is pushing the US to help Islamabad, saying that it has already done its bit. And we thought China and Pakistan were iron brothers. So Pakistan's last bet now is the United States of America. Have a look at this report. Later this month, Pakistan's finance minister will be leading a high-powered delegation to Washington to seek America's help, and reports say he will reportedly ask American leaders to nudge the IMF into releasing the next bailout as soon as possible. But the question is, will America help Pakistan? You see, just last month, Islamabad had skipped Biden's summit for democracy because it did not want to upset its friend China. And now it expects the same America to bail it out. Will the Americans comply? They might just. But in return, they might drag Pakistan further into their proxy war, the one that's going on in Ukraine. Remember, for months now, Pakistan has been discreetly sending weapons to Ukraine and in return seeking financial assistance from the NATO countries. So when the Pakistani delegation visits Washington, they must be aware that any help will come at a price that may prove to be diplomatically disastrous for Islamabad. And as the government of Pakistan struggles, so is the country's former Prime Minister Imran Khan. His legal troubles just don't seem to end. And what's worse, now even his wife is being dragged into them. Look at this report. Last month, Imran Khan's wife, Bushra Bibi, was summoned in the Toshkhana case, a case involving the sale of gifts from Pakistan's National Treasure House. Bushra Bibi allegedly helped her husband in selling those gifts to Dubai-based businessmen. And now she is facing the heat. And what is she doing about it? Well, last week, she moved the Islamabad High Court to challenge the notices that were issued to her. She urged the court to stop the authorities from converting the case inquiry into an investigation. And guess what? The court has complied. It has issued a notice to Pakistan's National Accountability Bureau for summoning Bushra Bibi without following the standard operating procedures. It says that the notices do not reflect compliance with the judicial orders. This may offer some temporary relief, but that does not mean the case is over. In fact, the court also said that it will not restrict the Bureau from taking the case forward, which basically means that both Bushra Bibi and Imran Khan will have to face the law. That is assuming they don't have another trick up their sleeves. Shifting focus for now to India. As I speak, it is hosting a special guest, the King of Bhutan, Jigme Wangchuk. This morning, he arrived in New Delhi for a 3-day visit, a visit aimed at bolstering bilateral ties and opening new avenues of cooperation. Jigme Wangchuk, in fact, has been here on the invitation of the Indian President. He was received by the Indian External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, a move that reflected the importance that New Delhi attaches to the visit. On Tuesday, the Bhutanese king will be holding talks with President Draupadi Murmu and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Reports say the talks will focus on reviving the entire gamut of bilateral ties and further advance the partnership that the two countries share vis-a-vis economic and development cooperation. Now, this visit has been in the works for quite some time now and is likely to be followed by the visit of another neighboring leader, the Prime Minister of Nepal. And the timing of these visits is intriguing. They come right after a statement made by the Prime Minister of Bhutan, Lothe Tshering. Last month, he gave an interview to a Belgian daily where he said that China has a say in the Doklam issue, much like India and Bhutan. Let me quote his exact statement. Doklam is a junction point between India, China and Bhutan. It is not up to Bhutan alone to solve the problem. We are three. There is no big or small country. There are three equal countries, each counting for a third. In other words, what the Bhutanese leader meant was that China is an equal stakeholder in the boundary issue as much as India. And these comments sparked some huge concerns that Bhutan could be tilting towards China, that it might be ready to cede territory to Beijing. And here's why this is concerning. Doklam is the very same place where India and China came near to a military conflict. This happened in 2017. China was trying to extend an illegally constructed road and stretch to areas adjacent to Doklam. Indian troops halted the construction. The standoff lasted 2 months. Some of these areas are in Bhutan, while others sit right on India's border with Bhutan. So basically, Doklam and its adjacent regions overlook parts of India. And a Chinese presence here poses a grave security threat. For the longest time, Bhutan was on India's side. Its position was the same as New Delhi's. But that appears to be changing gradually. The latest statement by the Bhutanese Prime Minister is proof. Now, the King of Bhutan is in New Delhi, and the Chinese shadow looms large over his visit. Remember, India is Bhutan's largest trading partner. India also trains Bhutanese diplomats, not to mention provide economic support. So with all that New Delhi does for Thimphu, there is going to be every reason for India to seek clarity from Bhutan on its stance with China, especially in the backdrop of the statement made by the Bhutanese Prime Minister. And as for China, it's not just Bhutan which it is trying to woo. Of late, Beijing has been on a diplomatic overdrive of sorts, especially its leader Xi Jinping. He is holding one meeting after another. 2 weeks back, he went to Moscow. He met the Russian president, a visit that was aimed at flaunting China's alliance with Russia. Everyone thought he would sit idle after this visit, but that did not happen. On the 31st of March, Xi Jinping met 3 visiting world leaders, 3 of them. The Spanish president, Pedro Sanchez, the Singaporean Prime Minister, Lee Hsien Loong, and the Malaysian Prime Minister as well. 3 meetings that affirmed Beijing's interest in presenting itself as the new force in international relations. All 3 leaders were in China for the Boao Forum for Asia, held annually in Henan and dubbed the World Economic Forum Conference of Asia. All these meetings, along with the Bhutanese Prime Minister's statement, indicate that China is certainly trying to up its game when it comes to diplomacy, that it has gotten rid of its previous wolf warrior style of diplomacy and is now trying to pull countries back into its ambit. Our next story is from Japan, where defense firms have unveiled prototypes of high-energy anti-drone laser weapons. They will be able to shoot down sophisticated enemy drones. This showcasing of Japan's defense systems coming as tensions continue to soar in the Indo-Pacific region. Our next report telling you more.
At a time when anti-drone jammers, anti-drone guns and anti-drone lasers are increasingly making their presence felt for the first time ever, Japanese defense firms Mitsubishi and Kawasaki unveiled prototypes of their laser systems, capable of shooting down incoming hostile unmanned aerial vehicles. This was at the Defense and Security Equipment International Expo in Tokyo. What does Mitsubishi's weapon offer? It has what the brand calls a counter-unmanned aircraft system, which is capable of shooting a 10-kilowatt laser, which can shoot down a flying drone from over 1 kilometer away. And the anti-drone system takes only 2 to 3 seconds to do this. It can also be installed on ground vehicles. Mitsubishi plans on providing the weapon to the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force and the Maritime and Air Self-Defense Forces. Next up is Kawasaki's anti-drone weapon, which has a 2-kilowatt laser power. Its laser can cover a distance of 700 meters and uses a 1 micrometer band fiber laser. So this is how it works. The shoot-down system detects an aerial drone with an infrared camera, tracks it down, locks onto the target, and fires a laser. Japan has contributed its share in the demonstration costs of these weapons. Over $21 million were put into the research and development of the laser systems. Japan's advancement in defense tech is part of its focus on its backyard. An emergency over Taiwan is an emergency for Japan, is what late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said. So Japan's interest in this latest technology comes as no surprise. In fact, China has also unveiled a naval version of its high-altitude, long-endurance drone. So why exactly are countries focusing on the development of drones? The strategic importance of the aerial weapons has been highlighted in recent conflicts, such as the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Drones are also being considered as better weapons for a number of reasons. They can maneuver through areas that are considered dangerous for humans. They can monitor and target areas without human assistance. This eliminates the margin of error and boosts accuracy. Drones can carry out operations for an extended period of time, increasing the accuracy and performance of a mission. The aerial weapons are cheaper to operate as compared to other high-tech weapons. India has also developed the Tapas BH-201 drone, which is a medium-altitude and long-endurance drone. The nation has also made the Archer NG drone, which can carry the weight of 300 kilograms of weapons. As Japan keeps an eye out for China's increased military capacity, it also seems to be growing its defense capabilities against any potential threat.
And our next story is from the United States, where former President Donald Trump is set to face criminal charges. Remember, he was indicted earlier for the hush money case. Meanwhile, here's what's happening. The UAE and Qatar have reportedly invested hundreds of millions in a private equity firm which was launched by Trump's son-in-law. Are countries betting on Trump's return to the top position? How are the Democrats reacting to these developments? Let's get to the details. The immediate question is, are countries in West Asia, their investment in Jared Kushner's firm, who is the former advisor, also the son-in-law of Donald Trump, an indication that they want to maintain warm ties, especially if Trump were to become the president of the United States again? Just how big of an investment did Kushner really receive? According to reports, the two nations are said to have poured in nearly $400 million in Kushner's firm. This is after Saudi Arabia invested more than $2 billion. This is an indication of Kushner's close contacts in this part of the world, which he developed during his time in the White House. The scale of the investments has drawn heavy criticism from Democrats, as Kushner has wheeled in about $2.5 billion from some countries. So how exactly did Kushner manage to build such ties? As the top White House advisor to Donald Trump, Kushner helped develop a regional pact, remember, the Abraham Accords. During the final days of Trump's presidency, in fact, the man held discussions which helped lift an economic and diplomatic blockade of Qatar by its neighbors. And this blockade was imposed when Kushner was building ties with the Saudi prince. But there were people in the administration who could see through Kushner's strategy. How has the opposition reacted to this? Democrats are calling out Kushner for the stealth and speed, they say, with which he secured the investments, only months after leaving the government. The former chair of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform had also opened an investigation into whether Kushner took in investments while sitting in the White House. Donald Trump, in fact, has also chased deals with West Asian countries. Trump logged in a $4 billion project with a Saudi real estate company to build a Trump-branded hotel in Oman, which was also backed by Oman's government. And it now seems that countries in West Asia are rooting for Trump while he becomes the first ex-president in history to face criminal charges. And what has Donald Trump been up to? According to reports, he was seen playing golf in Florida. Trump and his advisors, meanwhile, have been mulling over how to use his indictment to boost his campaign. His team has shown off the hush money case as a political hoax, a witch hunt, representing Trump as the one who has been attacked, while the former president shows his rage on his social media platform, Truth Social. What exactly is the hush money case all about? It involves an adult film star, Stormy Daniels, to whom Trump reportedly paid hush money to keep things under wraps before the 2016 presidential campaign. Now, Trump is expected to be present at the Manhattan courthouse. His presence will definitely be felt, as all trials and other courtroom activity will be halted before he is slated to arrive. And will countries continue to support Donald Trump after the court's decision? Or would the court's decision benefit Trump's game of gaining sympathy from his supporters? All eyes on what happens in the court. And our next story is from Israel. After delaying the controversial judicial overhaul, the country's cabinet has taken another contentious move, one that could ignite the same kind of protest that we saw in the last 3 months. Have a look at this report. On Sunday, the Israeli government approved a decision to form a national guard that would function as a private militia. Private militia for whom? For this man, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister of Israel. In fact, he is the one who came up with the idea. For the unversed, Ben-Gvir is a far-right politician. He entered the parliament in 2021. He leads a party called Otzma Yehudit, or Jewish Power. In the past, this 46-year-old politician has been labeled as Israel's Minister of Chaos. He has been convicted on at least 8 charges, including supporting a terrorist organization and incitement of racism. And he has now proposed a national guard, one that will deal with unrest in Palestine and take orders directly from him. The Israeli cabinet has given its nod, but reports say a committee comprising of Israel's existing security agencies would determine this National Guard's authorities. This committee has 90 days to make its recommendations. In the meantime, here's what a statement from Ben-Gvir's office has to say about this force. Let me quote. The National Guard would deal with emergency scenarios, nationalistic crime, terror, and strengthening sovereignty. It will comprise of 1,800 members who will bring back personal security to Israelis. The statement further added that more details about the Guard's goals and authority will be issued by the committee in 2 months. The announcement has been met with disdain by opposition leaders in Israel. Leaders like Yair Lapid, he put out this tweet on Sunday, calling the government's decision an extremist fantasy of delusional people. Exact words used. He said this move would cut budgets at other ministries to fund Ben-Gvir's private militia. And by the way, he's not the only one who has condemned the plan. So has Israel's former police chief. Have a look at this report. Israel's ex-police chief, Moshe Karadi, says that Ben-Gvir's proposed National Guard can be used to launch a coup in the country. He says Netanyahu should learn a little bit of history and see what happens in countries in which politicians have their own armed forces. And he has a point. Take the case of Turkey. The president of Turkey uses the services of a private security company, a company called Sadat International. In 2016, when there was a coup attempt in Turkey, this company is said to have helped Erdogan maintain his grip on power. Armed personnel from this company were involved in the suppression of the coup attempt. And in return, Erdogan made the owner of the company his chief military advisor. Will Israel use the National Guard for similar operations? Will it use them to suppress anti-government demonstrations? We don't know. But recent developments in the country add to our doubts. I'm of course talking about the protests that gripped the country recently. Thousands of Israelis from all walks of life hit the streets, protesting the government's decision to curtail the powers of the judiciary. In face of the resistance, the Netanyahu government backtracked and delayed its judicial overhaul. And now it has announced the formation of a private militia. What exactly is it planning? We don't know. The developments in the days ahead might give us the answer. And our next story is about a minister finding herself in the middle of a controversy. That sounds quite ordinary, does it not? But this is no ordinary story. It's one which has dominated global headlines over the last few hours. What am I talking about? Meet French Minister Marlène Schiappa. She finds herself in the middle of a raging row over what, you ask? Over a photo shoot. You see, the minister appeared on the cover of the Playboy magazine. The magazine's French edition will feature Marlène Schiappa along with a 12-page interview on issues like abortion, women's rights, LGBT rights. First things first, who is Marlène Schiappa? She is the current Minister of Social Economy and French Associations. Before entering the world of politics, she wrote about women's health issues. She is a feminist, an author, someone who for long has advocated for women's rights. In fact, while she was the Equalities Minister in 2018, she introduced legislation outlawing catcalling and street harassment. Her photo shoot for the Playboy magazine has drawn sharp criticism from not just her political opponents, but also her colleagues. According to the Prime Minister, the minister's decision was not at all appropriate. Marlène Schiappa, meanwhile, has defended her decision, and this is what she said on Twitter: defending the right of women to do what they want with their bodies, everywhere and all the time. In France, women are free, whether it annoys the retrogrades and hypocrites or not. Quite a statement, isn't it? And this, by the way, is not the first time the minister finds herself tackling a controversy. In the year 2017, she was accused of staging a visit to a so-called no-go area for women in Paris. In the year 2010, her book, which gave out sex tips for those who are overweight, was criticized. According to critics, the book reinforced harmful cliches. And the latest controversy over her shoot for the Playboy magazine is showing no signs of dying down. Her decision to be featured in the magazine has received backlash from multiple quarters. Meanwhile, the editor of the French-language edition of Playboy has called the minister the most Playboy-compatible, quote-unquote, of the ministers in the cabinet, given her strong commitment towards the fight for women's rights. What do you think of the minister's decision? Write to us and share your thoughts. Time now to tell you what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
The Kremlin says oil output cuts by Russia, Saudi Arabia and other major producers that have caused prices to soar are in the interests of global markets after Sunday's surprise decision by the OPEC+. The Philippines announces the location of 4 additional military bases to be used by U.S. troops, with one site near the hotly disputed South China Sea and another not far from Taiwan. $2.6 billion worth of damage caused to Ukraine's cultural sites in the war, says UNESCO. Revenue losses to culture, tourism, sports and entertainment put at $15.1 billion. The South Korean, US and Japanese navies began their first anti-submarine drills in 6 months to boost their coordination against increasing North Korean missile threats. The threat of long industrial action is not over for the UK government. Teachers in England have rejected a pay offer and are now set to stage a strike on the 27th of April. According to the National Education Union, the offer is insulting, and adding that around 98% of NEU members are in favor of turning the deal down. 1 month after a deadly train collision claimed the lives of 57 passengers, the first passenger train traveling on the same route recommenced. The train left Athens' main railway station with a final destination of Thessaloniki with 101 passengers on board and will make the return route on the same day with 147 passengers. Paris has voted against the use of rented e-scooters. More than 90% of voters polled against rental scooters, calling them a public safety nightmare that make sidewalks unsafe for pedestrians. Scientists have broken the world record for the deepest fish ever caught, as well as the deepest fish ever filmed on camera. A juvenile snailfish, part of the Liparidae family, was filmed in August 2022 at a depth of 8,336 meters in the Isu Ugasawara Trench, beating the previous record in the Mariana Trench by 158 meters. Former world number 1 Daniil Medvedev beats Italy's Yannick Sinner in straight sets to win the Miami Masters for the first time in his career. The win takes Medvedev to 4th in the world rankings, and he has won 4 titles and reached a final in his last 5 starts on the ATP Tour. Brooks Koepka shot a final round 3 under par 68 to claim the second individual victory of his LIV Golf career in Orlando. The 4-time major champion saw off Sebastian Munoz by 1 stroke, but Munoz's Torque GC won the team event by 1 stroke from Koepka's Smash GC.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. Thanks very much for watching, leaving you with Gravitas Images.